Unfortunately, we did see in 2020 in several states what threats against election workers and volunteers can look like. And here in North Carolina, state election officials say they're vowing not to let that happen on their watch. They're adding that law enforcement partners are on standby should any incidents reach that point.
Have an insurance plan. How do you respond in that situation and hope that it doesn't ever happen?
As the state's top election official, Karen Brinson Bell knows well what can happen when tempers flare in a hotly contested election in a swing state like North Carolina.
We've not had death threats or anything of that nature like some of our counterparts in other parts of the country have. And we're fortunate for that. But, you know, in the environment where we are, we know that that's a possibility because we've seen it play out.
Bell oversees the State Board of Elections and says while she's hopeful the election remains civil, physical safety checks have already taken place at county offices across the state.
And so then they've tailored a plan as to what's needed. Some of them needed panic buttons. Some of them needed, like a fingerprint entry.
As far as flare-ups at physical voting locations, Bell says de-escalation training has been provided to officials on scene if an incident arises, but that law enforcement is standing by.
It is a crime to threaten an election worker. It is a crime to intimidate voters. And, knock on wood, we really are seeing civility, but that's where, law enforcement would be called in.
In both scenarios, law enforcement agencies such as the Wake County Sheriff's Office are working with local partners to make sure people can vote and volunteer safely. Tony Godwin runs field services for the WCSO and says staffing has already ramped up with recent visits from the candidates, but it will increase even more around Election Day.
That's a whole different animal entirely. And we obviously want to make sure that we've got adequate folks here. We've changed some of the scheduling that we do. We make sure that we've got people, extra people here.
He says lessons have been learned since 2020 and that year's threats against workers in several states.
Every time we have an event, every time we have one of these, we make sure that we get together on the backside of it and say, okay, what did we learn? How can we do it better?
Just yesterday, we saw part of that safety plan in action when the Wake Board of Elections was delivered what they thought at first was a suspicious package. Fortunately, that box turned out to be a gift, but Bell says she's happy to see just that kind of diligence as we gear up toward the election. Live in Raleigh, Sean Coffey, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.